A lot of you might not know this about me, but out of all the 3 live-action Spider-Man we have seen, my favorite is Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I know it sounds hypocritical of me saying this considering my review of Spider-Man Homecoming, but as the years went by and I rewatched all the movies, my opinion on all of them has changed. And that includes the Raimi trilogy, but that's a topic for another time. As I was saying, Andrew's interpretation of Peter Parker is the one that stood out to me as my favorite live-action Spider-Man. Sure, he isn't the typical high school nerd that we see in other forms of media like the cartoons and TV shows, but he still maintained the classic characteristics that make Peter Parker who he is. The movies he was in were actually pretty good, well, except for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is well known for being an overcooked mess, to put it lightly, and because of that overcooked mess, we never got a third entry in the series, making the Amazing Spider-Man series a duology instead of a trilogy. Which is a damn shame, because before it was officially cancelled, I was really looking forward to watching The Amazing Spider-Man 3, especially because of the rumors going around that Venom would be the main villain. But with the recent appearance of Andrew Spider-Man in Spider-Man No Way Home and the rumors that Marvel executives still want him around, we could still get a continuation of the Amazing Spider-Man series. Or perhaps not. But I'm here to tell you my interpretation of a continuation of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But with a bit of a change, and that is, what if the Amazing Spider-Man was in the MCU? So in this scenario, Sony would be looking for a way to come back from the failure of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and instead of recasting Andrew and bringing in Tom Holland, Sony and Marvel will come to an agreement to bring in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man into the MCU. As for the timeline placement of both movies, I'll place the first Amazing Spider-Man in February 2012, meaning it takes place a few months before the events of the first Avengers movie. The reason why I did this is because I was inspired by Lucasfilm's timeline for his What If Andrew Garfield Was in the MCU video, where he explains that the Avengers wouldn't be able to stop Lizard's attack on New York because they haven't been formed yet. And as for TASM 2, it would take place in spring 2014 for more or less the same reason as the first installment. But this time it would be because Captain America would be too busy dealing with the events of the Winter Soldier, and as for Tony, we could say that he's too busy somewhere else, explaining why neither one is active in New York during Electro's attack. This brings us to the events of Captain America Civil War, where Peter will finally interact with the characters in the MCU. The beginning portions of Civil War would remain the same as in the original, until we get to Spider-Man's introduction. Rather than cutting to Peter and Aunt May as in the original, we see Peter in his TASM 1 suit fighting against Rhino. The reason why Peter reverted back to his original suit would be explained away by Peter during the fight, blaming Alexei for damaging his TASM 2 suit during their fight at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The fight between Spider-Man and Rhino would be similar to the one shown in Spider-Man Miles Morales the video game, though it would be less chaotic than the one shown in the game. Peter would soon start to get overwhelmed as he was getting people out of harm's way while at the same time fighting Rhino. Luckily for him, his prayers would be answered as Iron Man stepped in and helped Peter finally take down Alexei. A crowd of onlookers would applaud both of them for taking down Rhino. While this is happening, Iron Man would tell Spider-Man that he would like to speak to him regarding the Avengers' current predicament. We would then see them sitting on top of a building as Tony gave Peter a brief explanation as to why Captain America turned into a wanted fugitive. Peter would understandably be taken aback by this, as he had always admired Captain America, but he could understand where Tony was coming from when it came to the Sokovia Accords. In fact, he was surprised at the fact that Tony was doing this so that no more people could get hurt, because throughout his life he had always seen him as a narcissistic billionaire. The only thing he could not agree with Tony though would be making his identity public. Tony would question this as up until this point, him and Peter were seeing eye to eye. Peter would then divulge to Tony the origin of his powers, the death of his parents, his uncle, Captain Stacy, and Gwen. The latter being an example as to why he can't let his identity go public, because it could lead to him losing more of the people he cares about. Hearing this, Tony would think back to the events in Iron Man 3, where he truly suffered the repercussions of revealing his identity, which almost ended in him losing Pepper. So understanding Peter's situation, he would tell him that his identity would remain disclosed as long as he agreed with the Sokovia Accords. Feeling grateful for this, Peter would agree to this and would side with Iron Man. The rest of the events of the movie would go on the same way as in the original, until we get to the beginning of the airport fight. Iron Man and War Machine would still disable the helicopter, but before Cap could process what was about to go down, he is all of a sudden kicked to the ground by someone. And that someone would be Spider-Man, sporting his patched up TASM 1 suit. I'm sorry, Cap, this isn't personal. It felt pretty personal to me. All of a sudden, Peter's spidey sense began to go haywire as he jumped back, narrowly avoiding an uppercut from a shrunken down Ant-Man. Ant-Man would tell Peter to back off as he went back to help Cap to his feet. Iron Man would then detect the other members of Cap's team. Iron Man and War Machine would go after Wanda and Clint, while T'Challa went after Bucky and Sam. Peter and Natasha stayed back to deal with Captain America and Ant-Man. In comparison to Tom Holland's fight with Captain America, Cap's fight with Andrew Spider-Man would be a bit more dragged out since Andrew Spider-Man is a lot more experienced. But Cap would still find a way to outmaneuver him in a similar way he did with Tom's Spider-Man. Not bad, Parker. How did you know? Richard and Mary Parker were great people. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Peter would be stunned by this comment. How could both Tony Stark and Captain America know all about his life, including his parents? That question left his mind quickly, however, as he lifted up the container he was holding and got out of the way before he could get crushed by it. The rest of the events of the movie would mostly remain unchanged, except for a few moments here and there, specifically having to do with the fight against Giant Man. But when we get to the Spider-Man post-credits scene of the movie, we are shown the deleted scene of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 where Richard Parker is revealed to be alive.
It's me. It's me, Peter, and I'm sorry.
You're not my father.
I am your father, Peter.
Who are you?
I had to disappear to keep you safe. Keep you safe, Peter. I don't...
You're dead!
I'm not dead, Peter. I had to die to keep you alive.
As Peter and his father embrace, the scene fades to black, with the text reading, "Spider-Man will return." And that's the end of part 1. I know I haven't even tackled the MCU version of The Amazing Spider-Man 3, but I'm reserving that for the second part of this What If. This was a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time, even before Andrew Garfield's return in No Way Home. I really hope I delivered on making this a decent introduction for Andrew's Spider-Man in the MCU, so I would like to know you guys' thoughts in the comments section. And if you guys are interested in getting a second part to this What If, then let's aim for at least 20 likes. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.